Hello and welcome to the Primal Polar Pod, where we're demystifying the masculine and connecting you to your primal. My name is Antonio Mazzola, and today we have guest Justin Schaefer with us. Before we get in talking with him, just wanted to let you all know that there are spots available for the Summer Rite of Passage Primal Polar Bear Adventures men's retreats. It was brought to my attention that our price is kind of low on these, and that is on purpose. This is because I want more men to have this experience with me and share the growth and the experience that comes along. And on top of that, to make the deal a little better, I've included a promo code. It'll be Primal1250. If you use that on the website or let me know, I will happily get you that discount. But ultimately, it's to share the experience with more men and get more guys out in the mountains and initiated into the next seasons of life. So that being said, thank you there. And so Justin, why don't you give us an introduction and tell us about you a little bit?
Sure. Justin Schaefer. I'm very excited to be here. I've known Antonio for 2 years now, 3 years. I didn't do the research, but a long time, and met him through a men's group. We've been doing Saturday morning calls for that long, which has been amazing. And since this is a podcast focused on the men's journey or men's work, my journey really didn't start about this till after a head injury in 2007. It was a traumatic experience, but it was so much like there was no mental noise. And when it came back on, I noticed how much anxious and depressed and everything else I was. That just went on to an Eckhart Tolle, so many books on, you find a lot of childhood trauma, you find out the reasons for it. I think a part of my self-identified even with that journey for a while, found the men's group, and along that way have jumped from job to job, letting go of things I don't want while looking for things that I do. And this men's group has been kind of all along with the whole journey. That was one of the things I've been looking for a long time too. So, and essentially what brings me here is wanting to express things that I've learned along the way, as well as if it was me 4 or 5 years ago before I learned or knew any of this stuff or from the men's group, I certainly would want to hear that there's an answer. There's solutions, and there is a different identity, you may want to let go of and find. So,
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. So yeah, you kind of answered my first question I was going to ask you, is like, tell us a little bit about that journey. But if you don't mind, you said there's some things you learned. Like, what, if you can, what are like the biggest thing you've learned so far in this like men's work journey that you've been on?
The biggest things I've learned. Well, I'm going to hit on a point that I'm, I guess, better understanding or even more accepting right now is that I do have a choice, and there are alternatives, and I can change the way I act, even if it's not exactly the way I think or feel. What I've learned from the beginning, though, was just the beginning basic psychological concepts, why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, why my mind is giving me so many anxious thoughts, why I feel so alone, why I feel so, suicidal ideation, why I would want to end my life. Like, why is all this happening? I found that people go down that road and discover a lot of things. And for me, there was an identity that came with that, almost as if this is who I am. And all of a sudden it was how everybody else is wrong or different from me, which didn't necessarily help me for a long time, and still doesn't at times. But as I've learned more about the psychological and the disidentification from those parts of me, is, that's such a big thing to let go of, is identities and beliefs.
Yeah,
and
right.
Yeah, and it's, you can learn about them. We're given these identities and beliefs when we're younger. A choice when our brain is being created. I'm still just beginning to understand and accept these beliefs and identities, and just trying to let go of them to really want to be the person I want to be.
No, man, that's a big one. And that's something I talk about. I mean, I've talked about it in our group, and then things I talk about with other men is the stories we're telling ourselves that, or that we believe, or this narrative we have about ourselves that isn't even our story. It's something that, like, my parents told me, or my ex-wife, or an authority in my life, that I was too much of something, or I was, my emotions didn't matter. Um, is that something that, like, that you're kind of alluding to there? Like, the stories you have aren't yours? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, absolutely. And then and then you've also touched on the core of my resentment that I still
Mm-hmm.
carry towards it was discovering the things that were given to me in my mind that I didn't want to be a part of were given to me by other people. That's kind of when the resentment started. If I'm not aware of, or the most compassionate person, it still runs, in the background. There has never ever been a certain point in my life where I woke up and now I've got it all figured out and I'm on this journey. I picked a different direction. But it's just the understanding, like, that, yeah, it wasn't given to me, but it also wasn't given to them either on purpose, and
Mm-hmm.
but then you're also, I believe, and this is part of the men's journey too, is, this touches partially on shame, that you are still allowed to be mad at, your family and these other people, but there has to be a point of upset acting on, and self-forgiveness, which is a tricky thing, and that's what I found, I think, the most out of everything, is that it's really truly self-compassion when it all comes down to. It is at the root of all of this. That's the only place I think true healing comes from. So
Yeah, I love that. I love that you bring that up too, because it almost, like, as you're talking there, I can sense the compassion you have for the people who've given you that story, or who have told you what you are. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds like you've shaken hands with that a lot already. But definitely, I really resonate with that resentment piece that you're talking about, because and even now, like, and I've been doing this work for 6 or 7 years, and resenting the people who were shitty to me in my life, and still trying to find that compassion for them is a challenge for me. So I mean, that's really awesome that you bring that up, and even compassion for myself. For I think there's a part that it's like, I resent older parts of myself so much for believing these
mhm.
stories for so long, like that I'm not enough, or my emotions don't matter, or that I need to, XYZ. Or, like, for me, a big one is outsourcing my validation. And so I spent so much time doing that. And that started when I was little. And that wasn't the story. That wasn't my story. That was somebody else's. So, man, that's a big one. That's a really big one for me. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up. And I love the self-compassion, because it's so easy to shit on ourselves, man. Like, that's like the
So
number
easy.
one.
It's unconsciously easy, and it's the hardest thing to do, and it's so addictive.
Hmm.
The mental voice runs, and you're uncomfortable being uncomfortable with yourself and unhappy with yourself. And I say yourself and me. It's if I'm not conscious, or, a little bit compassionate towards myself when I'm by myself in my car, for instance. I mean, that mental voice runs, man, and
Oh
it
yeah.
really deep, dark places. This is also what I've learned though too, is being the best friend to yourself, as you would to somebody else, which brings us to this whole talk, is the men's group, the men's journey, and everything.
Hmm.
Reaching out when you would tell a friend to reach out. That
Yeah.
it sounds so simple as well, but it is, again, stepping from that uncomfortableness, from that identity, from that belief, whatever you want to call it. It's tricky, and it's something to it's a constant learning experience, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's a question, if you don't mind. So getting into this work, I know I struggled with this, but what was it like for you to be seen by other men being vulnerable, like when that started?
I'm laughing because too well, excuse me.
Oh,
You know it too
I
well.
struggled hard with this, so that's why
I know.
I'm so like the people listening can like be like, oh fuck, like that's me too. Like that's what I'm scared of. So that's why I
Sure.
bring it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed personally that parts of myself come up and will get on stage and will like or dismiss or act a certain way, whatever it is. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
But that has been the programming for so long.
When you say get on stage, can you say more about that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and you know what I've learned along the way, internal family systems.
Hmm.
So, you know, anybody who's interested in helping themselves or find a therapist along the way, that's I would absolutely I would suggest and strongly encourage internal family system therapists and study up on it yourself. So one of my parts, for instance, when I was little, was always whenever there was even a drop of attention, you know, I would take it up a notch. And if they were entertained or happy or giving me attention in any sort of way, my everything went towards that. It didn't matter so much my wants and needs. That wasn't even how I felt. It didn't really even matter. None of it. It was just that I was so desperate for the attention.
Hmm.
I was willing to put on this mask or play this role, or, you know, like I said, however you want it. There's so many ways and so many books people say it, but it really is, that is what happens. And it is almost like a drug, because I can find myself acting that way when I get, you know, the vulnerable and people are asking, it's okay. You can, you know, you could cry here, you could do whatever you want. And when that call hangs up, or I walk out of that house, or I get home, and it's just like, wow, like that was a dose of something I forgot I had, you know, that was something else. So, but I've been incredibly lucky to be in a group, you know, with you guys and find you guys, you know, and to be vulnerable. And it's been, it's been nice, but there has been, like, you know, situations where I know I'm turning on another part of myself. So it's tricky. I'm still getting used to it, for
Oh
sure.
yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah, you say on a stage. I think for me, I say it a little differently, but I think it's similar. And I'm going to say how I'm picturing it and see if it lands. But it's like being a chameleon and basically giving people what they want to hear. So then I get validated back, like giving some bullshit, abandoning what I actually think or feel, just so somebody else is happy. Is that kind of
Mr. Nice Guy.
all right?
Boom.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, I don't want to upset. I don't want to get the attention away though either. And it's a few things for sure. Chameleon, but for me it was a stage, and maybe a chameleon on a stage. I mean, I really do whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a Mr. Nice Guy is still that's a hard thing to let go of, for sure.
So, Mr. Nice Guy, if anyone's wondering, that's a coined term from Dr. Glover, but amazing book, and definitely applies to a lot of guys in the manosphere, so to speak. Everyone doing this work, but it's a lot of just self abandonment for other people to then be validated and have value from the outside. Is a quick synopsis there, but that may be something we can dig into later.
Yeah, chameleon, the perfect. That was,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Actually, my ex-wife used to call me a chameleon all the time,
Mm.
and it was like it fucking pissed me off like all the time. I'd be so angry, but like she's right. You know what I mean? She could see right through me, and I could not accept that.
Yep,
You know, I couldn't handle that shit. So,
I hear ya.
um, so I've seen you. You know, I've had the opportunity to witness you on this journey for the last few years, and I'd say, from my perspective, it took maybe till like the last, let's say, half a year for you to really show up a lot differently and really see some things. Um, is there, I guess, from your perspective, does that sound about right? And does that seem like, is there something that has shifted in you or that you've actually noticed, or is it just kind of this natural progression that's happened for you? And sorry to put you on the spot there, because I
No,
don't think
I
you were
love it.
expecting that.
This is one of the reasons I call you my brother. Honestly, I really appreciate, you know, Mark touched that on the last podcast. And that first one you had, I would suggest anybody goes and listens to that as well. But he's, you know, it's kind of pushing each other's edges and
Hmm.
kind of doing the and a different definition of support really is what it is. For me, I never had a man's support,
Hmm.
really shame based, but for whatever, I don't know what, so I appreciate you asking for sure. All I know is that I have been, well, I've been seeing therapists for a long time. Let's
Yeah.
get that clear.
Yeah.
That was needed to get a more healthy, a more, I want to say controlled, but that can also, that's a little deceiving, a little more controlled, view of reality along with my emotional state.
Well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for you?
Well, because I was so identified with my feelings for so long,
Hmm.
and I still am, don't get me wrong, catch me on a Wednesday afternoon coming home from work, after being in the car for an hour and a half by myself. But there's an identification with feelings that I had, excuse me, for so long. And excuse me, that I had nothing to refer to or bounce off of, I guess, somebody who knew intellectually. Like, so then if I'm feeling this way and I don't know how to react, what is the proper way? Or what is it that's having me feel this way? And is it normal? I feel abnormal. I feel this, I feel that. There's so many identities set up with it that it was consistency with a therapist, as well as I'll refer back to something I said on another podcast was, you are the sum of, the 5 or 7 people that you hang around with most.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had not continued to, build up those relationships and strengthen them, these people who I could genuinely reflect things off of and get straight answers, loving, caring, understanding, compassionate, straight answers. Let me emphasize that. I would still, I'm pretty sure I would still be wandering around, and going from, basically divorcing myself from my family to here I am, I'm married, and like, a house and everything. It's truly, it's first of all, great to have you point that out. So great question. And just those two things come to mind really.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
And then a follow up to that, and maybe this for everyone listening who is looking for the magic button or switch or task to do. It's like that doesn't exist. I would say. I think to kind of summarize, what I heard from Justin there, it's an accumulation. Like it's a burn. It's a slow build. I'm a numbers guy. I do charts and shit for all the engineering projects I do and have to crunch data, but it's like the 1% we change today and keep that 1%. Well, in 5 years, that's a pretty good deviation. And then in 10 years, that's a really big change. So it's just, if you veer off course just a degree, 1,000 miles down the road, that degrees and you're in a whole different spot. And that's kind of I think that's the best metaphor for this. And that's all. I want to reflect that back to you and let you know that I do see the difference in you, and I do commend you for continuing to show up. And that's a message I'd want to send out to everybody is like, just keep fucking doing it. Because I spent probably 2 years going in circles, talking to dudes, saying the same shit every day, being the victim of my own reality, and just playing the victim because I didn't know what the fuck to do, but yeah, man, no, I appreciate, the way you show up, and I appreciate you being here, being able to answer that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, no, that's okay. And I do want to emphasize though, because I see that a lot on, and maybe who I'm following on social media or whoever last video I saw, but there is a, and habits are important,
Hmm.
but I truly believe, and maybe it is because, I was injected with so much shame or whatever the case is, but without the self-love and self-care and self-analysis, and self-compassion, I really just, and I had gone through this myself too, I'm in really good shape and I have all this stuff and I am doing all this every single day, and I couldn't eat healthier, but there's still something missing. And you're
Hmm.
right, it's a slow burn for sure. But I do think like there's a few key elements of like that, just coming back to yourself or other people and getting constant reminders, for
Yeah.
instance, for you that, yeah, everything is going well, and still being nice to yourself along the way. But yeah, it does take a while.
Yeah, that's an interesting, and even you say reminders, but it's like I've found, like, let's say my average coworker will like give me some sort of compliment or something about this work, and it's like it doesn't land nearly as much. It's like, let's say if somebody like you or somebody who's been on this journey and who's actually fucking done the work, it's like, okay, I can receive that compliment there, like, versus,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like it carries weight. So I resonate with that, and I appreciate that.
Mhm.
You bring up something really great, and I actually did an episode, just me rambling on for about 9 minutes about discipline and routine. So what, like, with that being said, because I believe definitely like discipline has a very positive in on this journey, and it is that highest form of self-love. What, like, how has discipline shown up for you, or I guess with discipline, how have you shown up for yourself? How about that? And what does that look like?
Yeah, that second question was a really good one, because the discipline has been showing up for me. It's been a psychological discipline. For as
Mm-hmm.
much as I want to believe that I'm going to, by doing these things and getting all this stuff, I don't know how to phrase it, but my point is it's
Say it
the
messy, man.
huh?
I was at say it messy.
Say it mess.
We'll figure out after.
Yeah, okay. Because while I was doing all those things, I still was never ever considering that I was doing those. I really was going through the motions of trying to get somewhere else. The journey is the destination.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck is that? And then on my hard days, journey is this is my fucking destination. Like, do I really want to be doing this anymore? Like, I don't want to be doing this anymore. But then there's, that's not the point. Most of the habits that I've been noticing, I've been switching, for instance, is one, the just the ongoing thoughts in the head and my ruminating, right? Of people I haven't seen in a while, of relationships that I've been close with, things have changed. What does my brain think of it? Well, let's not go down that road. Let's just go back to the last conversation we had with these people.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a perfect example of the training I've been doing. So instead of believing, the relationship or this person thinks this way or how this is going, that, like, let's go back to this. Let's go back to the last conversation we had, and let's try to be our best friend. Your friend comes to you and says, I feel this way about this issue. What do you think? Well, what would you tell yourself? So while my habits, it's been the cold showers until I was tired of being cold for months. Like, and I have that shit. Physicality, working out is great. But even
Mm-hmm.
still, on the days that I can stick to all that stuff and I still feel like shit, it's still not necessarily bringing it home to my wife, but it's still recognizing, like, the habits are important because over the long run, yada, yada, yada. So
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to have like a definitive answer for that. And it's even harder, to go on social media and think you found it from, like, you follow this procedure for 10 months and you do
Oh yeah.
steps, and it's just, that's the answer. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I have my habits. I know what's good for me, and I know what's genuinely good for me, but I know a little bit better of who I am, but that took a lot of the psychological therapy
Mm-hmm.
work. So yeah.
No, fair enough, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think to kind of piggyback, it's like finding, because everyone has their routine, right? Like from Elon Musk to fucking, whatever influencer who works out, like, has their morning routine that you can look, like David Goggins, right? Like you can look at anybody, but it's about, I think, finding what works, what's sustainable for ourselves. Like I like meditation, but I can't sit and meditate for a half hour straight. You know what I mean? I can do like 5 or 10 minutes at a time, but like I stumbled into breath work, because breath work is like I'm doing something. So it's like, cool, I
Hmm.
can focus on breathing for 20 or 30 minutes instead. But yeah, man, I think, cold showers, they're cool. Like I like doing cold showers after I work out, but I don't want to fucking do that first thing in the morning all the time. But if I'm in a place, like when I go on retreats, like, yeah, we go cold plunge. Like there's a frozen lake, like we're going in that shit. Like that's just, I think, but yeah, I think you hit on a good point. That's like, doing what works for us. Go ahead, man. Sorry, I'm.
No, I appreciate you doing this rambling thing. And he had said in the last podcast too, I do want to hear from you.
Oh
So
yeah, for sure.
the best podcast, even Tim Ferriss goes on rants, but it's all related to what we're talking about. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for sure,
But
man. Well,
it is knowing what you want as well, and not thinking that it's going to get you to the next, or not thinking it'll be the savior, or when I get there, I'll be happy kind of thing, but just genuinely what you want. And if I could go back a year or 2 years when you're saying you've seen all this stuff, it really was just trying to show up better for people around me,
mhm.
but knowing that until I fundamentally have a healthy relationship with myself, I'm not going to be able to show up for other people in a healthy way. And that's what sucks. Until you're like genuinely more accepting of yourself, until you're a little bit easier on yourself, until whatever it is, it's just not as easily reflected to other people. So it's like, I think that's what, I'm just maybe started setting my goals and just kept thinking about it over and over. And, habits just came up along the way and things changed.
All right, I get it. And that's a good way to look at it. It's like where do I want to be versus how do I get there? Because if we see where maybe we want to be, then the path there starts to open up versus trying to figure out the path the whole way. Because how many times, and I know I've done this, like I start like, oh, I'm going to do this and be this guy, and like force myself down a path that isn't even leading in the direction necessarily that I want to go.
Mm.
And it's unrealistic or unsustainable. That's all. So I think you put a nice way around that, or a way to reframe that. And like, I know this kind of goes against the journey is the destination, right? But if you look at where I want to be, like if I want to be in a certain, let's say, fitness level, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to do the work, but it's like, okay, how can I fit that work into my life versus just start doing, if I just start going and working out with no goal in mind, well, what am I doing? I could be doing the wrong stuff. So
Yeah.
I think that's a very simple explanation, but I think that's a great for overall, like encompassing that. So
Yeah.
So at this point in your journey, like what would you say is your motivation to keep going?
Mm.
And
Well,
like
that's something.
yeah, and like where does that go? Like speaking of that, so what is your destination look like, or your journey look like from here?
Sure. It's been tough some days, and I haven't had the best days over, like, and I think it's the holiday season. I'm still not as a as much of a, I don't know what you want to call it, like the perfect man or whatever kind of perfect word you want to use for it. But there is, I'm doing a lot for, like, my wife, for instance, but not just for her. It's because I know it makes me a better self. I'm doing more for, like finding gifts for kids, like my best friend's kids, over the holiday season, not because I have to give presents, not because I want to look good, but because I love these kids and I don't see them that often. So like I want to do something for them. So like my end goal, I think it's constantly changing. And I would be kidding myself, like, to think this is where I want to be one day, and for whatever reason, because I'm still having such a hard time of letting go. Like for almost a decade, I went for firefighting, and it was like, and in the end, it wasn't, I don't think it was ever really because I wanted to be a firefighter. It was because it was job security. And I, and not that I believed, but I knew how people would look at me then, and it would be all good and be all positive. So it was just a complete ego thing. So I have some hesitation putting myself where I'll be in 10 years, or, even like 5-year goals as far as a career, which is all I identified with for a while. As far as personal life though, I do, my wife and I getting more comfortable with finances. That's a fucking arm wrestling match. I'm still not strong enough for it yet, but it's something we're flirting with, and it's something we're talking about, and building a relationship with my wife, which is huge, because then all it does is develop my relationship, my emotional life better. Just, as much as I've heard from parents, which I have absolutely no idea because I don't have any kids, but it's a mirror to an extent, like my intimate relationship of how I'm, acting towards her, or how I can show better with her is, it's a good test for me. So where I would want to be is a lot more of this, a lot more being settled into the present. And I've been working on that more and more and just accepting, my life for what it is instead of thinking when I get here, I'll be happy, I'll get whatever. Um, and eventually clients. I mean, my God, I've been flirting with that idea forever.
Hmm.
But now that I'm back in school, I think it's a more um, legitimate goal. So yeah.
Yeah, I get that, man. Awesome. Thank you. No, thank you for sharing that. Um, well, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me here.
Yeah.
I love hearing. I mean, my big takeaway from this is it is the journey, and that's a great reminder. But is there anything else you wanna wrap up with here and say to men maybe looking to get into this work or who have some hesitation? Is there anything you want to offer to them?
Yeah. And I can only offer from my experience. And it would be if I was the one listening to this 5, 7, whatever years ago, it is it is truly a journey, but the first step is to understand that you're not that different. It really isn't. And while it might sound berating and degrading and whatever, there are absolutely people who have been in your shoes. And what's more is much there are guys who are worse off than you are. But what you might be missing and what might make you feel empty is not your fault. And it is fixable. It's just one day at a time, really.
Awesome,
So
man. I
yeah.
love it. All right. Well, thank you, Justin, for being here.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you, everybody, for listening. And everyone out there, you guys be well.